Alright guys, so is the Sony A7RV a good hybrid camera? Yeah, it's a damn good hybrid camera. Alright, so before I get into all this, here is my setup. I'm just running a small rig half cage. I like half cages because I can just keep them on there and I never have to take it off. Even if I'm doing photo shoots or anything like that, I just keep that cage on. And I do have a skin on here only because anyone who knows the stuff I shoot, I'm always in mud and snow and rain and whatever. So it's gonna be a little bit of a mixed bag video, just talking about low light and just if this is a good hybrid combo. And again, everyone knows I'm coming from Canon. I was using Canon gear for 3 years and I'm just over it. Go watch the other videos. So when this camera came out, the A7RV, I was like, it might be time. This is just a hybrid beast. We'll talk about ergonomics and if it's easy to switch back and forth, battery life, and low light, image quality, S-Log3, all that. So I'm gonna start with the boring stuff, ergonomics. Some people might think that's boring compared to low light and all that, but it's very important. Something that was pretty cool in here is the toggle switch. So I can easily go from photo mode to video mode and then S&Q mode. I personally don't really care for S&Q mode on any camera, only because usually it kills your audio out. I'd rather have audio just in case, you never know. So usually what I would do is I would just go up in here and change that 24 to 60. That way you still have audio even when you're in slow-mo. The original reason I switched to R5C was just because of the cinema menus and how easy it was laid out. It has shutter degree and false color and all that. I do miss all of that. That is like a true, again, hybrid setup. But again, battery life was just horrible on it. Anytime you want to do video, you had to rig it up and then de-rig it to do photos real quick, and it was just a mess. So with this, after a full day of shooting, I only had to change my battery out once, which is amazing. All I do is I pop on so again, I just keep this half cage on there so I can go from photos to videos within a moment. But I do put this Condor blue top handle. This top handle is literally the most comfortable top handle I've ever used. Autofocus, the R5C's autofocus, I didn't have a complaint with it. A lot of people had a complaint with it. It worked just fine for what I needed, but this thing sticks way better. I have a toggle tracking thing on. It's in the custom menu settings. I just put my center point on here. I just click this and it tracks it. I declick it to untrack. It's way easier than me having to do this and touch this, and I just rather keep it like this. I don't even need a top monitor on this. The monitor on here works perfectly fine now. I remember with the old A7R4, I did not care for the monitor. I didn't care for the viewfinder. The monitor actually looks a little bit better than the viewfinder. The viewfinder gets weird looking. Towards the end of the night, I just ended up ditching my top handle and I was just running gunning like this. And I'm not used to working like that. I'm used to like rigging stuff out, but this was it just was so flawless that I didn't have to like do anything crazy. Photos and videos, the autofocus is pretty much on par on both ends. Literally zero complaints. If you go and watch Phil Bloom's autofocus Sony things, he really breaks it down really well, and he's right. It depends on what lens you have. You change the settings and what frame rate you're in. So when I'm in 60 frames per second, depending on what lens I was having on, I would change the transition speed a lot. Now let's talk about low light on this. Obviously, this is a larger sensor. The low light's pretty great on it. We can start going through the footage. You'll see, obviously, if there's not a whole lot of light in your scene, it's going to be noisy footage. It's going to be on any camera. Even on the FX6, the next day I shot another concert, and though it is way cleaner, you can pump a lot more exposure onto the sensor and then bring it down post, which gives you cleaner results because you hide the noise. On this, I would put it up to 12,800 ISO when I had to, but there's still a lot more noise in there and you have to run neat video on it. But the big difference is on my R5 and R5C, if I push it to even 6400 on those cameras, I would have to run neat video, and there was all these clip blacks in there, and I would have to go put like film overlays on it just to make it look like I meant to like make it look like crap. But with this, shooting S-Log3, no matter what the ISO was, I'm able to keep all of that details in the shadows, so even if they're super noisy, I can still run denoising on it or neat video, and you still just get like this higher, cleaner look out of it than you would with the Canon cameras. The secret is to shooting with something like this, if you're shooting low lights, to have faster lenses. That's why this 35 to 150, it's f2 to 2.8. That f2 is going to come in handy because that's a whole nother stop you get to push in that sensor. Again, though, obviously with the FX6 sensor, FX3, A7S3, it's a better low light camera. The two base ISOs on this is 800 and 2500. I would still push it up to 6400 and it still looked like insanely clean. 12,800. The big thing is, even though it is noisy, all the details still there. And that's what's kind of important, because when you go and run denoising and you still have all this detail being preserved, you can still get a pretty clean look. And again, you just want to hide the noise and the blacks and kind of crush the blacks a little bit more. But again, it's still going to have a higher, cleaner look because it's still capturing more dynamic range than what you will get on the R5, the R5C. Another cool thing too is all the cards that I run on my FX6, I could also use on this A7RV, and that's the pro grade V90 cards. These things work just fine. My FX6, I don't run 120 FPS on this, but I do run 60 all eye in the FX6 with these, and they work just fine. And so they're probably gonna work just fine on here. Didn't have any drop frames, zero issues with it. For photos too, since you're pumping out 61 or 62 megapixels, you want a V90 card just so you don't run into any buffering issues. Now, yes, the video is great. There's nothing else to say about that. Again, when I had the A7R4, I didn't care for the video of it. It was insanely noisy. It lacked a lot of color range. I don't know, it was weird. I didn't care for the video on there. On this, I'm happy to say this is truly a better hybrid camera than A7R4 was. Now, when it comes to photos, even more, I was pushing the ISO up way high. I'll show you some photos. And again, the trick is, if you're gonna push it, it's like this camera's not gonna see into the black of night. Like, no camera's gonna be able to do that. Maybe the FX6 and FX3, but the whole point of having higher ISO is to push as much exposure and light into the sensor, even if it's lower light. Get as much as you can into the sensor so you can bring it down in post and hide the noise. That's the trick with it. So even this at 12,800, whether you're in photos or video, you can hide it if you have a lot of light. Now, if you don't have a lot of light, it is noisy. Once again, you're getting a lot more megapixels in there. You're gonna see all the little bits of noise in there. But once you're uploading to like social media or anything like that, it's gonna compress it so much that a lot of that noise is gonna be hidden. But yeah, I would be totally confident with this, pushing up to like 64, 8,000, 10,000 even in photos. On a commercial shoot, I'd be a little bit apprehensive going past 8,000. Pretty crazy. Again, I had the A7R4 and I didn't care for that camera too much. And this thing they just really, it's the same sensor, but for some reason, you're getting better color out of it, way better autofocus, way better video out of it. Now again, the day after I shot another concert with the FX6, and the biggest difference was I was able to use the 24 to 105 f4 on the FX6 at 12,800 ISO and get even cleaner shots than this combo with 35 to 150 f2 to 2.8. So even though this lens is way faster, I still had to pump up the ISO in a lot of situations, and it was still way noisier than this setup that I'm working on right now. Well, I'll put it this way, even at f4, 12,800, shooting at 60 FPS, I still had to use the internal ND on here sometimes just because of the stage lights, where again with this thing, I was still having to crank it. So is this a low light beast? No, that's my opinion, but I think you can push it a lot more than people are thinking you can. And so far from everything I've shot between these two cameras, I feel like the footage that comes out of here is still sharper than it is on the FX6. And that may be just the internal baking, but I don't know, it looks sharper, but the FX6 still has this like more beautiful dynamic range and roll off and all that. But yeah, I don't really have much else to say. That's pretty much it. So